Hello, my name is Lane, and I really like this idea of doing a video type discussion board. I feel like sometimes I get lost reading some of the discussion posts, or I'm just skimming, so this is a little bit more personal. Feels like we're all in class together. I will be reading some things from my laptop here, so if you see me glancing back and forth, that's what I'm doing. So to do my wrap-up assignment, I wanted to first start off with just an overall project update, what I'm doing, and that sort of thing. So I am evaluating the Healthcare Management and Occupational Therapy Fast Track program at UAB, specifically looking at the healthcare management side of the program. So this program is for incoming freshmen to UAB. If a student knows that they want to pursue occupational therapy, they can apply to do the fast track, which is essentially 3 years of undergrad in healthcare management and 2.5 years of OT school. Once you're accepted into this program, you're also accepted into OT school, and it's all contingent on making a certain GPA, and the fast track is exactly what it sounds like. It is very fast, and so students are taking up to 18 hours per semester. I was a fast track student, so when we got to when I heard about this project, I was thinking like, okay, what am I gonna do this on? And the way that I'm involved in it is, so I'm actually a TA, teacher's assistant, for the healthcare management program right now, as I am finishing up my doctorate. So specifically for this wrap-up assignment and for chapter 13, it was all about adaptability within the utilization-focused evaluations. So, and I kind of wrote some notes out as I was reading through the chapter, but this project had to be very adaptable for the most part, just due to the time constraints and having to fit it all in within really a semester, but really more like a half a semester. The focus and end goals of the project are for the program involvement and how the healthcare management program can modify and change the program so that it can continue growing and continue providing this fast track opportunity for students who want it. So now I'm going to go through and talk through the column that was presented in chapter 13 of having a more fixed program evaluation versus a more adaptable one. Clearly, because of time constraints and the semester, mine project has had to be very adaptable, so to speak. So the first column was talking about the purpose. The focus and the end goal of this project is for the continued improvement and growth for the healthcare management program to modify and adapt things for the continued success of the program. So the stakeholders really wanted to know, okay, what did these alumni find that was beneficial doing the healthcare management progress versus the traditional way? What are they being able to use in their clinical setting as an OT that pertains to healthcare management, if anything at all? As far as I know, no sort of data like this has been done before, and I've been working as a TA for about 5 years, something along there. And so these sort of projects are kind of what I take on to begin with, as well as grading and stuff like that. But so we do reach out to alumni and healthcare management alumni specifically and see kind of where they are at. But it's never been focused on just the fast track program. Evaluation questions. So when I was thinking through, how I was going to structure the questions and survey, was I going to do interviews? I decided, one, really didn't have time for interviews. There's only 1 to 2 days out of the week that I can devote like a full day to this project. So I wanted to maximize my time and thought that surveys would be, one, the easiest and probably the best response for students. So I initially wrote out a bunch of questions, survey questions, and I edited and revised, did that over and over until I finally got the questions how I wanted them to be worded. I sent that to the stakeholders for them to review, to go through. They made some edits, and then we finalized it, and now it's been sent out to students. So that's how the evaluation questions have been adapted and changed. stakeholders knew what they wanted to be questioned. It was just getting it into a nicely worded format that we had to change a couple of times. But other than that, I mean, that part has been pretty much fixed. So then we move into the evaluation methods. I would say that these have also been a little bit more fixed than not, but there's always been room for adaptability. Because I don't have, as much time as I would need to do a full and thorough program evaluation, we stuck with just doing the surveys instead of the interviews because of time constraints. So that had to be a little bit of adapted. And so far on the surveys, I've gotten 13 responses from Fast Track specific graduates, which is a great number, and 5 responses from traditional OT graduates, so students who took a traditional route. So I would like to get the traditional route student number up a little bit so it could be a little bit more of a comparison, because I don't think 13 to 5 is quite fair as far as data goes, but I'm gonna work on sending that out to a couple more students in the next week or so hopefully that number will continue to rise. And then evaluation reporting. So this is where I currently am out with the project. I have got the data, still working to get a little bit more, but now I'm starting to think, okay, what can I do with this data? How do I want to present it? And go from there. So the timeline for giving my report, if I am able to do it on Zoom or in person, is tentatively set for the first week of December. That's we're having to be flexible with that because of final exam schedules, their, traditional work schedule, my work schedule, that sort of stuff. So if we are not able to meet in Zoom or on person, then I'm going to plan to present the findings either in a recorded Zoom interview or through like a infographic so that they can look at and that we can talk about. And also I should mention, yes, this project is for a course and it's due by the end of the semester, but because I work in this program, it has been talked about that this can be a continued thing. So as far as the stakeholders are involved, there's not a hard deadline for them as much as there is for just me getting this project turned in for a grade. Hopefully that makes sense a little bit. So I'm gonna present whatever I find, but if it needs to continue so that we can gather more data, or if I can, tweak it a little bit more if needed, that can happen because I plan to work for this program for at least the next year. And then finally, the last column talked about accountability, and talked about, will this project be used by the stakeholders? And I feel pretty confident that this project and the data that comes from it will be used by stakeholders because, one, they requested it. I sort of asked, is there anything that I could do to evaluate the healthcare management program or a program within the healthcare management department? And they specifically brought this one up. So I feel confident that they're going to use the data and the findings, and they were very excited for me to work on it. So there's always room for continued growth within this small program too, because it's a university program, is always expanding, it's always changing. Moving into chapter 14, so it talked a lot about planning for presenting and how to present the recommendations. So I liked the, 10 steps of how to plan for recommendations. The first one was to negotiate inclusion of recommendations. We've already kind of discussed this. The stakeholders are on board with me presenting recommendations. They love to hear student feedback, whether it's good or bad, because they know that that's how programs can grow and become better. So the second one was generate appropriate, relevant, and actionable recommendations. So I really liked what the book talked about on, okay, what does this mean? The book gave a list of, are the recommendations expected about program improvements? What about funding, about program expansion? What is it that you're looking at? Is it appropriate? Is it relevant? And how / if is it actionable? And the book also talked about providing recommendations on actions that the stakeholders do have control over. So there are some recommendations that I could give that the stakeholders have no control over, so what good is that doing? Not much. But providing recommendations on small or big things that they could do, whether them two personally or them two trickling down to the program advancement team, to the academic advisors, that sort of stuff. How can they better manage this for the program's effectiveness? Hopefully that makes sense. Number 3 was ensure database recommendations. So looking at the data and making recommendations based off of that. I'm still kind of in this stage just because I'm not 100% finished on getting data, so still waiting on that one. Number 4, distinguish different kinds of recommendations. So I really liked this part of providing different recommendations based on central questions, issues versus secondary or minor issues. What's a big picture issue versus a small picture issue? And then also the book talked about how we can provide recommendations on actionable things that can be implemented quickly versus something that's going to take a long time, and giving step-by-step directions of how to implement these recommendations. Number 5, consider optional formats. To me, when I read this, and I may have taken this incorrectly, but when I read this, I thought the book was discussing providing different formats of presenting the recommendations. I think that's correct, but someone correct me if I'm wrong. For my project, this could look at providing an infographic of recommendations of what was collected, what was found, and recommendations. Providing a video link if, they are auditory learners. I thought that could be a bit of both of the, okay, I can watch it on my own time, but I can also send it easily to people either above or below them, so to speak. Or, of course, presenting and providing the recommendations either in person or on Zoom for that real life engagement, which is what I would prefer, but it is contingent on their schedules right now. Number 6 talked about illuminating the implications of recommendations. So once I finalize the recommendations based on the data, it would be good to look back at what is the cost, the benefits, and the challenges that these recommendations have to be implemented. So if the cost outweighs the benefit, then why would I try to recommend it? Number 7, be thoughtful and deliberate in wording the evaluation. So I really liked how the book talked about avoid words that confuse or distract from the central message. Thought that was really good. Number 8, allow time to do a good job on the recommendations. So this is more of a challenge just because of the time constraints that come with this project and having to have it completed for a grade by December. However, there's a possibility that this project will continue, but it will be assigned as more of a TA project and not one that I'm graded on. But once I've finished the course project, I'll present the findings and recommendations to the stakeholders, and if needed, we can use more time to collaboratively work together to pilot test the recommendations and kind of go from there. So if needed, we have that option. Number 9, develop strategies for getting recommendations taken seriously. Right now, I'm pretty confident that the stakeholders of the project will take the recommendations and the data collected seriously, just because they are the ones that were very excited about the project, and they were the ones that kind of thought of the project and helped me come up with this idea of, hey, this is a need, could you help us with it? Absolutely. The book, for this section, the book suggests including a working session that includes clear assignments of responsibility for follow-through and timelines for implementation. Again, can't really do that this semester, but this is something I absolutely can do as I continue working. Okay, and number 10 is the follow-through. So traditionally speaking, if this was a project that I was only going to be doing for a semester, I would report the findings and kind of let it go from there. I really wouldn't have the opportunity to follow through, but because I'll continue working for this program and for the stakeholders specifically, this is something that may fall onto my plate as a potential project for the future of how can we follow through? How can these recommendations and the data that's been collected be implemented? Because at the end of the day, I think both the stakeholders are very intentional with what they want from this project and what they want me to do. Chapter 15 and 16, it is all about reflection, what you've learned, how you think the project has gone, that sort of stuff. So a little bit about reflections on what I've learned. One, time management. Taking a big project like this, and really this is just a life lesson I think that I have learned, but taking a big project in general and breaking it down into step-by-step parts is something that helps me out tremendously. But two, specifically with this project, I was overwhelmed at first, and I was like, oh my gosh, where do I start? You know, I have these tools, I've learned what program evaluation is, but where the heck do I start? And so I sat down one day and I made basically kind of like a timeline of, okay, this week I'm going to work on this, and this week I'm going to work on this, and this week I'm going to work on this. And so I broke it down into small sections, and that made such a difference. Not only did I not wait to do it to the last minute, but it also helped me to, one, feel like it was obtainable and that I could do it, because my brain, when I see a big project like this, and I've learned this through lots of therapy, but when I see and take on a big project, I get overwhelmed, shut down, and then usually run away from it. But taking it step by step like that has been such a game changer. So learned a lot of time management and breaking it down step by step. And I've also learned how program evaluation can be used within OT and how it applies to me in a clinical setting. So when I first started this course, I was honestly really confused. I don't know what I thought program evaluation was, but I was not correct. So when I first started it, I was really confused on how I could use this in the clinical day-to-day life. I treat children on the autism spectrum, and currently I don't run any programs. I have a coworker that does run programs, but I work for a nonprofit that runs a lot of programs. So I was sitting there and, I was thinking, okay, well, since I don't do programs, does this really apply to me? It still does. I'm using this evaluation mindset in my day-to-day clinical life. So I'm looking at what activities worked well for a kid, what activities did not work well for a kid. How can I grade it up? How can I grade it down? The stakeholders, the parents, what do they want out of OT services? Are they more focused on, dressing skills versus play skills? That's a silly example, but what is it that the parents or the stakeholders are wanting from this service? And so kind of reshifting my frame and thought process behind it, I've been able to conceptualize, oh yeah, I do use this sort of thinking every day. It may not be for a program, so to speak, but I use the same thinking, the same logic, the same step-by-step mindset, if that makes sense. And with saying that, I think just taking a really zoomed out approach of not thinking of it so, okay, program evaluation is only this, this, and this. It's not. Nothing is that, especially in the OT world. If I've learned anything, it's that nothing in the OT world is black and white. We are a lot of gray, and that's okay. So zooming out and trying to focus on how I use this, because I knew I used it, it's just in a different capacity. Again, I don't think I actually really got the entirety of the concept of program evaluation was until about midway through the weekly reflections. So I would read through the chapters, I would take notes, and then I'd go to the questions, and I could answer them, but I would still be so confused as to, one, how this applied to me, and two, how was I going to use this, if that makes sense. But it wasn't until I started thinking about my project specifically and going back and reading through the notes and skimming the chapters and stuff that I'm like, oh, that's that's what that means. That makes sense. I feel like if I had known when my project was at the start of the semester and had that mindset throughout, I feel like I maybe would have had a better grasp on it quicker. And some things that I'm proud of, honestly, the amount of work that has gone into this project, I feel like there's been a lot of working on it for a lot of time, and then having to take some breaks because, there's no data, there's nothing really that I can do right now, or I'm waiting for X, Y, and Z response. And I'm also proud of how my attitude and thought process behind this class and program evaluation has changed. Because like I talked about, I was really confused. I didn't quite understand program evaluation and how it was going to be applicable to me specifically. But I'm proud of having zoomed out a little bit and being able to recognize like, oh, I do use this. And I took multiple videos of these different parts, and now I'm gonna go and like combine it all together and edit it to make it look somewhat cohesive. And not that I'm just rambling, but I hope this was helpful to someone. I hope it made some sense, and I really like this format. I think this is a great idea as far as discussion boards, because again, when you're a virtual class, it's really hard to connect with others in the class that you may not know. And so this is a great way to put a name with a face and a voice with a name. So thanks.